let's get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who weren't here last week, I'm Maddie and this is Tom. And this is the second of 4 sessions we're going to be running to help people prepare for the AAWT. In the last session, we discussed navigation and water management, and this recording is now up on YouTube for anyone who missed it. Today, we're going to be talking about gear. So just like last time, the session will kind of work by us talking for a little bit and then leaving space open for questions, but feel free to jump in with questions at any time. And we'll also have some time at the end for just general questions, whether it's related to this talk or the previous one from a couple of weeks ago, or just anything in general related to hiking or the AAWT. So today, we're going to be focusing on gear, and specifically what we're going to be talking about is how you can hike comfortably with a relatively low pack weight. So we think that it's very achievable for most hikers on the Australian Alps walking track to have a pack weight below 10 kilos for most of the trek without compromising on safety or comfort. And this weight includes all of your food and water. So before we go into that, I'll just mention that everything we talk about today is outlined on our website, where we have a gear list that is specific to the AAWT with certain products that we would personally take. So whilst in this presentation, we're going to be focused more on the types of items we're taking rather than specific products. But if you're interested in the exact details of those products, they'll be up on our website. And finally, the last thing I'll mention is that obviously what we're talking about today is what works for us and what we believe works really well for most people, but everyone is different. And so just bear in mind that there might be something that works better for you. All righty.
Cool. So just quickly, why do we care so much about gear? When hikers get together, probably the first thing that people always seem to talk about is gear. You're on the PCT, you get to a water source, everyone's amalgamating together, and people can't help but talk about gear. And so for us, we have 3 key metrics that we like to evaluate gear on. The first is it going to keep you safe? The second is it going to make you comfortable? And the third is, how light is it? And so all of the stuff that we are talking about today is based on evaluating those 3 key metrics. Cool. So let us start with sleeping. People can see the sleeping slide? Excellent. Cool. All right. So what we're going to do, is we're going to talk about a few of the key items in each kind of different class of things that you might look at bringing, and we'll talk about what we think works well and why we would pick something like that. So to start off with, we're looking at a tent. So there are heaps of different tents that you can take. There are heaps of other types of shelters that you could take. So why would you take a tent over, say, a tarp or a bivvy? For us, we have found that tents, especially on the alpine track, provide just a place for you to a place where you can, you want to be able to set your tent up and you want to be able to have the protection from the elements. With a tarp, you don't quite get the bug protection that you get with a tent, and with a bivvy, you get lots of condensation issues. So specifically for hiking solo, we'd look at something like a 1-person trekking pole shelter. The reason we'd look at taking a tent that sets up with trekking poles is because it's a lot lighter than something that sets up with poles included. So something might be like a shelter down here, like the Durston X-Mid Pro. Specifically, this one is made of DCF, and that just makes it lighter. And so, really we're looking at a tent that weighs around 400 to 500 grams. And so, of course, there are heavier tents that cost less money, but if you're looking at getting, a really light, comprehensive option, then that's kind of the range that you're looking at. And there are lots of brands, there's Durston, there's Tarp Tent, there's Z-Packs. Um, uh, but yeah, we think that these trekking pole tents are a good middle ground for protection and weight and all of these different things. Um, with these types of tents, it's really important that you take the right tent pegs or stakes. And so we like to take bigger, heavier pegs for the important corners. And then for like vestibule tie-outs or additional guy lines, we like to use pegs that are much smaller and lighter. So in this photo here, the silver pegs they're 11 grams and they're indestructible. You can hammer them with a rock and you'll basically never break them. Whereas these red pegs, they're more around 3 grams. They're made out of plastic and with a little bit of, you can see a bent one in that photo too, actually. And the point is that they're useful for just staking out a few extra points. And with a flat head, it means that they're really good to put rocks on to weigh them down. So the next thing is, what type of sleeping bag are we looking at taking? For us, we personally recommend taking a sleeping bag over a quilt. We've used lots of quilts and they're very much having a moment. Lots of people say they're like a great ultralight option, and they're good, they're fine. But we personally find that we've always just slept better in a sleeping bag compared to a quilt. In particular, you're probably looking at a sleeping bag that has around 400 grams of down, and so is probably around a total weight of, maybe 600 grams, something like that. Whether it has a hood or no hood, that's not really a big deal, uh, because if it doesn't have a hood, it just means you take like a warmer beanie or something like that. Then moving on to a sleeping mat. So we would recommend taking a full-length inflatable sleeping mat. The top of the line model right now is the NeoAir X-Lite, the latest model that came out. You can take half-length sleeping mats, but they're a compromise. Then, like the weight that you save is not really offset by the comfort, especially with these new really thick light inflatable mats. Um, the other option that you can consider is going for a foam mat. And that is something that we personally have really good results with because we get sick of inflating mats at the end of the day. And it means you don't have to deal with punctures and that type of thing. But we've found for most people, they much prefer an inflatable mat. Finally, on the alpine track, if you have an inflatable mat, oh yeah, so David said, I see these micro inflators. Have you tried them? Yes, this is something that we've been testing out quite a lot recently. There's the FlexTail Zero pump, which is about 60 grams with the little battery and inflator. And it's okay. It's a little bit gimmicky. It doesn't how well, like it doesn't, we found it doesn't work well in the cold, and how much it inflates seems to be quite variable. There's a new product called the PadPal, I think 5.1, or I don't know, it's the latest PadPal, where the way it works is you get a power bank and you hook it up into it, and it weighs like 5 grams, and that one is definitely a lot better. And so that's a really good option if you don't like inflating pads. Um, but for us, we are even lazier than that, and we can't even be bothered to do that. So we just throw a foam mat on the ground and call it a day.
Yeah, I think for us, at least whilst we've been testing these little inflators, we've found that it would have just been faster to inflate the mat normally. But we've only really just started using them, so we might be missing something. But there are definitely some lightweight options that you can consider if you do want to take one of those.
Yeah, with the PadPal looking like the best one, I think. Um, Cool. All right. So on the Alpine track, if you are taking an inflatable mat, you'll likely be wanting to take a ground sheet for if you end up staying in any of the huts for an emergency reason or anything like that. You don't want to be sleeping with your mat directly on the ground, as that's asking for trouble. Don't ask me how. And then finally, earplugs. If you end up at a campsite where there are lots of people, or maybe someone's going to bed later than you or something like that, or maybe the birds wake you up in the morning. Cool. Yeah, so if you're interested in the specific items that we recommend, we've got the gear list up on our site. But what we're more focusing on here is, yeah, the broad strokes of like trying to help you think about things so that when you're looking at different items, you kind of have good metrics to evaluate them against. Does anyone have any questions about the sleeping stuff? Cool. All right.
Awesome. On to our kitchen equipment. So very simple. You've got your water bottles. We generally take just cheap plastic water bottles with a pop top lid. The top lid we find is really easy to drink out of, especially whilst you're walking, which is great for us. We really love it. We generally prefer not to use bladders because they are much less durable, and if they break, you can be in a bit of a pickle. Whereas a plastic water bottle, it's never going to break. You can throw it off a cliff and it'll be fine. But bladders, they can get punctures or they can tear quite easily, and then you really need to find a solution because water is pretty essential out there, and you might not see any other hikers. So that's why we would suggest carrying water bottles.
Bladders are heavier too.
Bladders are heavier. Um, the next thing, I mean, a spoon, any type of spoon is all right. You can even take a knife and fork if you want. It's up to you.
But you can do anything with a spoon.
You can do anything with a spoon. Water filter. So we really like taking a water filter because it means that you can drink from water sources straight away, which is really, really good. We find that, maybe we rock up to a water source and there's cold running water flowing through the stream and we just want to drink it straight away. Whereas if we had purification tablets, which we also carry as a backup, but if you only have purification tablets, you need to wait 20 to 30 minutes for them to work. But a water filter, you can just drink straight away, and we really love that about them. But it's important with your water filter that you make sure it fits onto your water bottles. And so that's something you'd need to test beforehand.
The other thing with the water filter is that you end up carrying like a lot less water. And so in an area like Kosciuszko National Park, where you might be crossing water sources every 10 minutes or 20 minutes, you can basically just, carry a small amount of water, like a couple hundred mils, and then, whenever you're thirsty, you just drink from a stream. So that's a really good way to keep your pack really light. And that's why we think it's worth the time and effort of carrying a water filter.
And so Matt's just asked a question, how much water carrying capacity do you take? So we touched on this a little bit in the last session, but just to briefly give an overview, for the Victorian section of the AAWT, we would generally carry around 4 litres each, whereas we find in New South Wales and the ACT 2 litres is generally enough. But again, there's so many factors depending on this, where you're camping, how much you drink during the day, how fast a walker you are. But for a rough guide, yeah, we'd probably carry about 4 litres through the barriers.
And the barriers are not actually the problem where you have, and is not actually where you have water problems now because they put a whole bunch of rain tanks in. It's more the section south of it. But there's a lovely 2-hour session that you can watch on YouTube where we talk about all that.
And just to touch on David's question, do we carry a spare water filter? No, we don't. You can definitely put them in your food drops. We've never actually had one break on us, and we find that we can back flush the filters in town, which kind of gives it a bit more of a longer lifespan. But it's a great idea to put a new one in food drops because they can really slow down over time as they clog up a little bit.
Yeah, having said that, I mean, a water filter, like if you look after it, should last the alpine track pretty easily. The main thing you need to be careful of is that you don't let them freeze. And so if it's really cold at night, you need to make sure that they're stored in your tent, or if it's really, really cold, like in your hiking pack or in your sleeping bag in like winter conditions. Because once they freeze, then you have to like test that they still work, and there's a protocol for it, but it's better to just not let them freeze.
Yeah, all great questions. So moving on. So yeah, touched on the water filter. A great example of the one that we would use, the one in this picture here, is the Platypus Quickdraw. But there are so many options. Again, it depends what's available to you. There's pretty similar weights and flow rates, so it's up to you really. But that's the one that we really like. We find that the flow rate is really good.
The other thing is that with water filters, people can make it really complicated with the idea of having clean bottles and dirty bottles, and bottles that you filter into other bottles. Like, we just keep it simple. We just drink out of it, and it saves you heaps of time.
Yeah, and it's also a great idea to have a lid on your water filter because that stops any dirt coming in the top. And not all of them have lids, or they're removable. So that's another thing that we would definitely recommend. In terms of cooking, so if you're like, there's kind of two options here. You can either cold soak, which is when you don't carry a stove, or you can carry a stove with all your cooking stuff. Depending on the conditions and how we're feeling, we might do cold soaking, or we'll carry a pot with stove and fuel. If we're doing cold soaking, we'll just carry a rehydration container, and that's kind of it. And a good example of that would be just like your peanut butter jar, your plastic peanut butter jar. They
Good
work
old
great.
Bega.
But that being said, it's also really nice sometimes to take a stove and have hot food and hot drinks. And so if you are going to take a stove, we would definitely recommend carrying an alcohol stove with a caldera cone. And so the reason we really like alcohol stoves over gas stoves is because there are a few things there. They're really stable. With the caldera cone, the pot sits exactly in the cone and it doesn't move. It's really stable. It's also a very simple system. For those of you who haven't seen something like this alcohol stove before in this image, it's kind of just like a little metal tin with some foam in the middle, and you pour your metho onto the foam. It doesn't break, there's no little pieces that can fall off and make it stop working. It's always going to work as long as you have metho. So that's really great. They don't break, they're very simple. And the other thing we really like about them is you can carry exactly the amount of fuel that you want to take. So this obviously depends on, depend on person to person, and you'll kind of have to test this as you go if you go down this route, but you can really fine tune how much fuel you're carrying, and you also don't have to carry a heavy canister, which is really great. We really like it. The downsides of an alcohol stove, though, is that there's not really any way to control the temperature. So they're really good for heating things up, but if you really want to cook something nice and fancy, then it's probably not the option because there's no way to simmer or to do like a full force heat. It's kind of just one constant temperature, and it might take a little bit longer to boil your water.
Yeah, I think that, like, for example, for us, if we're doing dinners where all we're doing is heating something up, like if you're having 2-minute noodles, really fancy, or like a dehydrated meal where, yeah, you're just heating water up, we use, something like 30 mil a day, which is like 25 grams of fuel a day. So if you're doing like if it's, say, you've got a 4 or 5 day food carry, you're only carrying 120 grams worth of fuel in a bottle that weighs 15 grams, you know. And when you compare that to like a gas system, you really see the weight savings and the simplicity. They really have a significant benefit.
Yeah. Are there any questions about this stuff? Oh,
Yeah,
good question.
yeah. So that this whole system that you can see in the photo is called it's from Trail Designs. It's called the Trail Designs Caldera Cone. So this cone, this is the Caldera cone that is made specifically to fit a pot that you either buy from them or a pot that you already have. And then that is a little alcohol stove that they have made that costs like 15 bucks or something. Um, and it there are lots of different places to get alcohol stoves. We like this one because of the kind of the fluff that's inside it. It holds the liquid, whereas in a lot of other stoves, you're just pouring it into like the bottom of a Coke can or something. And so the problem is that if you finish cooking and there's fuel left, you have to pour it back into your bottle. Whereas with this system, it just sits in there and you can put the lid back and you can screw the lid on. So it's just simpler and easier. But yeah, you can buy this as like so you can buy this as like an all-in-one system. So yeah, not a reused cat tin. Yeah, they are called um, cat food stoves is another name they're affectionately known by. Um,
Yeah.
Any other questions? Cool. All right. All right, electronics. So this is a little bit of a tricky topic for the alpine track because unlike other through hikes or long walks, you very infre like you basically never walk into town. You've kind of got it depends if you're hitchhiking or not, but a lot of people would only walk into Thredbo or maybe Mount Hotham, or maybe they'd get a lift to Omeo or Adaminaby, but Thredbo is probably the only town that basically everyone walks through. Um, and so what that means is that you want a system where you can recharge your stuff based on what you put in your food drops. And so a good electronic system for the alpine track is a little bit different to trails where you might walk into a town every couple of days. The other thing is that because of how remote the track is, and as we touched on in our navigation session, we strongly prefer navigating using digital means. Because of these two aspects, it's really important that you have redundancy in your electronics. So the first thing is a power bank. Power bank, the capacity will depend on your overall power needs, but for us, a 10,000 milliamp hour one is pretty good. Phone, probably whatever phone you've got. We really like iPhones. They're really battery efficient and the cameras are good. Um, in particular here, this head torch that we have, it's from a brand called Zebralight, and the reason that we like it is that it's really bright. It can go up to like 1500 lumens, which is basically enough to turn night into day. And so for us, this is a this is not a head torch that we carry on a lot of other hiking trails. We carry it on this track because if you get caught in one of the remote navigation sections at night and things are going wrong, if you've got a shitty little head torch, you're going to really wish that you had something better. And so for us, this is it's part of that safety mechanism where um, something brighter than like a normal head torch might be like 400 lumens, and this is, say, 1500. And so the other thing that we really like about this head torch is that the battery is removable. And in particular, you can use this battery as a power bank. So let's say for some reason your power bank dies, for some reason, if you realize that, but your head torch still has a fair bit of charge left, you can use it to recharge your emergency beacon or your phone or something to help you get to the next town or your next food drop, or if you meet another hiker and you can beg for some charge or something like that. And so for us, this is part of our redundancy system, just having a backup, because you could carry two power banks, but that's probably heavier than what you need. So for us, having a head torch battery that can charge stuff is a good middle ground, where this head torch battery can charge a normal iPhone maybe 2/3 full. Yeah, cool. Headphones, this is personal preference, but we really like carrying AirPods on the trail. Um, or just like wireless headphones. The reason that we like that is when we walk together, we can have one in each ear and we listen to audiobooks together or something like that. I'm sure like wired headphones are fine, but because we just hike together, we prefer wireless ones. Oh yeah, USB battery charger. Yeah, that's this little thing here that lets you use your head torch as a power bank. Cool. And so Claire's just asked, how long does your power bank last on the trail? So for us, and so this is something that is very personal, depends on what phone you have, it depends on how you use it, all that type of stuff. But for us, we find that our phone lasts 3 days on the trail if it's in airplane mode and we're taking some photos. And one of these power banks, one of these 10,000 milliamp hour power banks can recharge your phone fully twice. So if you're not using any other electronics, that would be like 9 days, but that would be really pushing it. Um, so, if you say you thought that you'd get 9 days, then maybe you're like, that's because your food drop is 6 days or 5 days or something. Or if you actually had a 9-day resupply, then you'd carry a bigger power bank. This power bank is 150 grams. Cool. All right, satellite communication. This is something that there's really no excuse to not have it now. It's really awesome to carry something like an InReach Mini because uh, it's your SOS beacon, it's your emergency button, and so the new iPhones and I'm not sure about Androids, but uh, there are new features coming into phones where you can get emergency SOS stuff even when you don't have reception. For us, particularly hiking solo, that would not be enough of a comfort buffer for us personally. So uh, we like to think of, the InReach is the device that's packed away and is hidden and is the thing that you pull out to use as your PLB. Or it's also really good for the scenario that happens 100 times more often, where maybe you expected to be somewhere at some point and you're just running like a day late and you need to let people know that, it's okay. Or maybe you've like hurt yourself, but not in a way that's critical, and you just need someone to come pick you up. That's where hitting the SOS button feels really overkill and you can't really use it for that. But it's awesome to just be able to say, look, I'm in trouble, but it's not urgent. Can someone come pick me up? The other neat thing is that it can pull in weather forecasts. So if you don't have reception and you're kind of wondering, oh, should I push over the crosscut saw today or over the main range? Um, I mean, you'll have reception near the main range, but say the crosscut saw, uh, if it's going to be like blizzard 100K an hour winds, maybe you don't want to go over in that day. You could end up in a lot of trouble. And so the InReach is like, it adds a safety element in that regard as well. The other way that the InReach is really useful is that you can upload GPX files to it. It's not very useful for navigating. It doesn't have maps on it or anything like that. But the point is that if you're employing like an electronic nav approach, quite heavy on that, if your phone broke and your watch broke, or you ran out of power, that you can turn your InReach on and you'll get a little line that you can follow. and it tracks where you've been as well if you've had it turned on. So, I mean, for 100 grams, they just add, you know, a very high level of comfort and increase your safety margin as well. Cool. And then, and so yeah, Matt, just to answer that question, yeah, we don't carry a PLB on top of the InReach. We just use the InReach. So a wall plug. I mean, if you're not going into town, you're not really going to need a wall plug. But if you are, then you can carry one. And then finally, with cables, people tend to carry a lot of weight in cables. It's one of those areas where you might spend, $500 to save 100 grams in your tent, but you could get onto eBay or AliExpress or somewhere and buy some like $5 or $10 cables that could save you, 20, 30, 40, 50 grams. And it's just like, it costs you basically nothing. It's really easy to do. And so that's something that we definitely recommend. A cable that's 10 centimeters long is good enough for hiking. Cool. Does anyone have any other questions about electronics? Great.
Alrighty. Packing and miscellaneous items. So when it comes to hiking packs, there are so many options nowadays. We personally find that 45 liters is pretty good for us for the Alps track, but obviously this depends on what gear you're carrying and how long your food drops are and all of that stuff. But for us, I'll just clarify, a total capacity of 45 liters is good. So that might mean an internal capacity of 30 liters and an external capacity of 15 liters. And so if you're going for a frameless pack, which is what we would generally use on the Alps track, a great example of that would be something like the Nashville Cutaway, where it's frameless, it's kind of got like running vest straps, and we find that they're really, really comfortable. But there are so many options when it comes to packs. If you're carrying a bit of a heavier load, you definitely should consider a framed pack. So something that would be a really great example of a good framed pack would be the Durston Kakwa. And yeah, so that's just if you're carrying a bit of a heavier load, they're just a little bit more comfortable.
And so the kind of, for us, the delineation, it's around the 10 kilo mark, 10 kilo mark. So if you think your pack is regularly going to be under 10 kilos, we would recommend going the frameless route. Whereas if you think it's going to be regularly above 10 kilos, then that's when you're looking at going for a framed option.
Yeah, but it's completely personal preference. Some people never find frameless packs comfortable, and that's totally fine. There are lots of great lightweight framed packs that you can use as well. All right, pack liner. So this is something that we actually think is really quite important. And I guess the reason we go for a pack liner over something like a rain cover is that rain covers just don't work. The rain gets in under your back or they get in through the sides. Rain covers just don't keep your packs dry. And so we love to use a pack liner on the inside of our pack just as kind of a second waterproof layer. So your pack itself, a lot of these ultralight packs that you can buy nowadays, the material that they're made of is waterproof and the pack itself is seam taped. And so that means that the pack is pretty waterproof by itself, but it's not perfect. And, it only adds a few extra grams to have a pack liner, and it's just going to ensure that everything stays dry. So it's just a really great backup layer to keep everything dry in your pack. Food bag. A food bag is what type of pack liner? Yeah, so Claire's asked what type of pack liner we like to use. We really like to use Nylofoam pack liners. And you can just buy them online. They're kind of like this plasticky material. They're a bit annoying because they're really loud
At the beginning.
But they're really great. They're super strong. We've never had them break on us whilst we're hiking, unless you like cut them, that is. They don't just wear out. And so we really love to use Nylofoam. But again, there are lots of options. Spelling. Yeah, we'll send it through in the chat.
Yeah, and so this is like all of these items that we're specifically recommending are in the gear list that we've got up on our website, and you can find it on there.
Yeah, but yeah, we really like the Nylofoam pack liners.
Yeah, the thing with pack liners is that people can go really fancy, really expensive, really heavy. These are 30-gram plastic bags that are really strong. And you don't need any more than that. You just have to twist it up at the top with the stuff that's in it and pop it and then fold it over. And that's a lot more secure than any roll top dry bag that's, fiddly and extra weight and effort.
Yeah.
And do you put your
And so we would also use these Nylofoam pack liners as our food bag a lot of the time. And so for a food bag, that's something for the Alps track, or just in general for every hike, we would take a food bag, mostly because it's really great to help reduce your scent profile. And so what that means is that you're going to attract fewer animals. And so on the Alps track, this means, attracting fewer possums or rodents in the huts. And that's that can be really important. And on other hiking trails where there might be, bears or something, it becomes even more important because they're very much attracted to the scent of food that you carry with you. So a food bag is just a really great way to keep that scent contained as much as you can and stop animals being attracted to you.
And just to clarify, like the plastic that the Nylofoam bag is made out of, is smell impermeable. So if you get a normal Ziploc, smell actually comes through it. And so animals can pick up on that. And so you need to use a food bag that doesn't let scent through it. And so these bags are used to put clothes in when rooms are being fumigated. That's what they're initially designed for. Or they're used as like cadaver bags. So yeah, it's not just about a bag, it's about a bag that doesn't let scent through it. And of course, it doesn't mean that you don't have any food smell. It's just about reducing the food smell to a lower amount to increase your chances of not having problems with animals.
Yeah. And so Glenn has just asked how many days of food do we carry? For something like the Alps track, this is really dependent on how frequently you place your food drops. But we would probably, we don't really like carrying more than, say, 5 days of food at a time. Then our packs start to get a little bit too heavy. Ideally, it'd be maybe 3 days of food at any given time. But for the Alps track, that's not always manageable because of your food drops that you need to put in. So it's very much dependent on where your food drops are placed for something like the Alps track.
But you can definitely fit 5 days of food in a Nylofoam bag.
Yeah.
You could maybe fit 7 if you were careful.
Yeah, you can get them pretty big. They're pretty big bags.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the other thing is we're going to be running a food drop session as well, where we're going to talk about, distances between resupplies and where you might want to put food drops and or how you can do the track without food drops in a different session.
Yep. All right. The B-Day, we really, really like using a B-Day when we're hiking. It's something that we've found it feels much more hygienic than using something like toilet paper after you go to the bathroom. And you also don't have to carry out your toilet paper then, which is just nice. And so we'd highly recommend trying one if you haven't used one before. You can buy like little ones that just fit into the top of your water bottle, and they work really well. We love them. So we'd highly recommend that. And the last item that we've got.
And it reduces chafing as well. It reduces chafing, which is really good.
The last item that we've got here is a sun umbrella. And again, this is something that we would highly recommend taking. It's really great for just reducing your overall UV load when you're out, which is really important for somewhere like Australia, especially when you're in the high mountain ranges. But it's also really great for just making a little bit of extra shade when you're stopping. Um, and not only that, whilst you're walking, you can have your umbrella up, and if it's SPF 50, you can take your hat off and you just feel so much cooler. You just feel better, the heat of the day doesn't affect you as much. And so for somewhere like the Alps track, this can be really, really useful because there's a lot of exposed area that you're walking through. And if it's the middle of the day, it can just be really hot. And so a sun umbrella, it just it takes the edge off the heat, which is really nice. And you can also use it for rain. I mean, as long as it's not too windy, they work really well for keeping you a little bit drier in the rain as well. So we would highly recommend using a sun umbrella.
Yeah, and they don't have to be super heavy, like 130 grams. So, um, if you compare that to like the amount of sweat that it saves you, it's it was really crucial. Like sun umbrellas were really crucial to our success setting the speed record on Te Araroa in January, February, where it was regularly over 30 degrees every day, and we weren't stopping in the middle of the day, and it just consistently kept our core temperature like that bit cooler. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they're really good. Worth trying if you haven't used one before.
Yeah.
Are there,
Oh,
Glenn has asked, do they clip to the pack? Yeah, that's a really good question. It depends on what pack you have, but for us, when we're using our Nashville cutaway and we have a Montbell umbrella in that image there, we find that it can kind of like sit in one of the top pockets of the pack, and then we strap it down with one of the cords that's attached to the pack. It's a little bit finicky and it doesn't work in high wind, but there are definitely systems that you can make where it will fit on your pack and you can walk with your hands free.
yeah, like you can MacGyver a way to clip it to your pack if you like if you can be bothered. Um, and uh, it's one of those things where, you know, people have this idea of having it like being hands-free, having their umbrella up and walking, for hours and hours. In reality, the hands-free mode is really good when you need to do something with your hands. But I wouldn't necessarily expect to be able to leave it up for extended periods of time um, without holding it up. Um, unless the wind is really low and you have a really good system. Like for us, when we were walking on the beach in New Zealand, if the wind wasn't too high, we could leave it up forever, and that was all good. Um, but if you're in a trail where it's a little bit overgrown or it's not super clear the whole time, then you're going to be like taking it down to avoid it getting hit anyway. So, um, yeah, like a sun umbrella, it doesn't gel super well with using two poles at the same time. And so you're kind of either using an umbrella or using maybe one pole or no poles. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And then David asked a question about sun hoodies and how we rate them for UV protection. Um, honestly, we don't really rate sun hoodies. We find that they're really hot because you have this like piece of fabric around your head. And the whole point of a sun umbrella, right, is that you can take your hat off. You have this portable source of shade. And because your hat is not on, when you pour water on your head, it evaporates much faster and it cools you down a lot. And so um, the sun hoodies are really popular in countries where the UV is maybe not that high. But if you've got like a trucker's cap and a hoodie, you're still like the sun is still coming in like this, and you're gonna get burnt. Um, and so it's classic in Australia to see maybe a US hiker come in and maybe they've had success with a hoodie and a cap, and then they're just getting fried out here. So that's where something like a proper broad brimmed hat is really what you want. Um, and hats are only like part of the equation because you still get a lot of UV reflected off the ground coming up and hitting you. And so we'll be talking about our approach to sunscreen later.
Yeah. All right. We might have one more question coming through.
Yeah. Any other questions on this stuff? Cool.
Alrighty.
Matt, if you ask a question, we'll come back to it. All right, so this is a big one, and so this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just highlighting some of the stuff that we think is really important in the first aid and repair kit. So to start off with, a pocket knife. Oh, okay, hang on. So we'll just go back to Matt. He said, I haven't found a hoodie that is any material other than nylon, which gets very smelly. Merino is the answer, but no sun hoodies. There definitely are merino sun hoodies. I think MacPack maybe makes one. But I mean, for us, we don't really like sun hoodies anyway. So yeah, cool. And the other thing is with this idea of getting smelly, you're outside, and I think the answer is to not care. And so it's a problem when you go into a building, or maybe you get like if you're getting a hitch in a car with someone, maybe they'll care. But if you're outside, it doesn't really matter. And so it's kind of best to just embrace it. Because there's not really much avoiding it. Cool. So going back to the first aid and repair stuff. So the first thing is a pocket knife, just something really small that has like, some scissors and a knife and like some tweezers. So there's the Swiss Army Knife Classic. That's kind of the iconic option. That's like 20 grams. When we're really trying to cut weight, we take just mini scissors that are 3 grams, but the pocket knife, having the knife and the tweezers and everything, it's just a little bit of a more well-rounded package for most scenarios. Obviously, a snake bandage is really important. What's more important is that you know how to use it, which is where like a first aid course or something comes in. Needle and thread for sewing stuff together. The AAWT has a habit of breaking gear because it's, rough and that type of thing. The needles are also really good for popping blisters as long as you sterilize them first. So DCF tape. So DCF was the material that some of like the lightest tents are made out of. DCF repair tape is really useful because it sticks really well to a lot of different fabrics. And so if you get a hole in your tent or in your rain gear or like lots of different stuff, DCF tape just sticks really well to it, and it's waterproof. Super glue is good for if you lack sewing skills like me, and so you can often just super glue something back together. I mean, in theory, if you get a really big cut that like steri strips won't work or something like that, like you can super glue it together, but that's a pretty bad scenario to be in. And then cord. I think the general theme with all of this first aid stuff is that we tend to like to carry lots of different things, but we don't carry very much of any of them because just having a little bit of it is often enough. It's enough to get you into the next town or to deal with the main problem or, to get you to your next food drop. So you don't need to pack like a massive tube of super glue. You can just pack like 2 1-gram tubes, and that'll be enough. And then matches for being able to start a fire. Mat repair kit is really important if you're taking an inflatable mat. Thermarests, they come with a repair kit, and so do others. But you can buy, if you've used it or if you've lost it, you can buy specific tape to repair punctures. And we detail that in the gear list. But the other thing that's really good is you can get these glue dots where you just stick the dot on, and that stops the air coming out. And the really hardcore solution is to put the glue dot on and then put the tape over it. But sometimes the dot is just enough. And then because different mats are made of different materials, like not everything sticks to this different types of materials. So like DCF tape sticks really well to some sleeping mats, but not to others. And so that's why it's really important that you're not just like, oh, duct tape will fix it, because, it might not stick to your mat because they're always made of like special materials. And then finally, in terms of medications that we take, we take four things. We take ibuprofen, paracetamol, so Nurofen, and what's paracetamol called again?
Paracetamol. I
I don't know, whatever it's called. Panadol, so Nurofen and Panadol, an antihistamine, like Zyrtec or something like that, and caffeine tablets. So ibuprofen and paracetamol, obviously both just over-the-counter painkillers. Ibuprofen as an anti-inflammatory can be really good as well if, you know, maybe you've pushed it too hard and your like some tendons are swelling or something like that. It's not about to keep you going at whatever pace you're going at, but it's to help keep inflammation under control so you can, take a rest or get to your next food drop or a town or something like that. The other thing is that, and we've used this perhaps too much on FKTs, combining ibuprofen and paracetamol works really well together. Like you can take them together. And so, we don't need to go crazy with taking, with getting prescriptions from doctors about extreme painkillers or something. Um, you know, if you're needing more than ibuprofen and paracetamol together, it's like you need to get out of there. Um, Antihistamines, we really like taking antihistamines because, if you get, like for me, I'm really sensitive to insect bites. Like if I get bitten by a sandfly, it will be over a month until that bite is gone away. And whereas if I hit it with an antihistamine straight away, it's gone really quickly. Um, you know, that it's just the type of thing where it only weighs a couple grams, and you might find out that you're out there and something really just sets your histamine response off, and you just really want to be able to dull that down. Um, so yeah, we really like taking antihistamines. Like we don't take them every day, but it's just on a um, as needed basis. So David has asked, do we take anything for a stomach bug? Yeah, so for something like a stomach bug, so you can take Imodium. That's not a bad option. We've personally never needed or used it, and that's probably why it's fallen off our list. But you know, like it's like if you carry 2 tablets of Imodium, it doesn't weigh very much, and if it's something that is like particularly concerning for you, and maybe you've had it happen in the past, then yeah, maybe it's worth it. But for all of these things, it's like one tray of ibuprofen, one tray of paracetamol. We're not taking like a whole big box of it.
I'll just add as well that we would definitely take something like Imodium if we were traveling or hiking in a third world country.
Yeah.
I think for something like the Alps track, we probably wouldn't take it, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. Like Tom said, it doesn't weigh much and it very well could come in handy. So yeah, it's not a bad thing to take.
Yeah, what's a lot more important than carrying Imodium is to wash your hands, because the main reason you'll get sick is from poor hygiene. Um, okay, and then the final thing is caffeine tablets again. Like you probably don't need to take these, but the reason they're useful is because if you end up in a scenario where you need to do a really big push, like maybe you miscalculated how much food you needed to carry, and you're like, oh shit, I'm running low on food, and you want to like bomb it out to town, you know, or to your food drop, being able to just like have it like a hit of caffeine can just make your life a lot easier. So it's not really necessary, but for us, we just like to carry it, and it's very infrequent that we would use it. Um, but it's just like a nice insurance policy to an extent. Cool. So this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but does anyone have any questions about first aid and repair? Cool.
Awesome.
Do.
All right, consumables. So these are kind of items that you're going to use through over the days, and you might have extras in your food drops that you're just going to top up with over the course of your trip. So things that we would generally take are lip balm,
Lip balm.
Lip balm. Water purification tablets. Like we said earlier, we would generally just use our water filter, but if a water source is looking particularly gross, we'll definitely pop a tablet in there as well. And yeah, they don't weigh very much, and they're very easy to carry. So we always carry those, even if we've got a water filter.
Or like say for instance you're filling up 4 liters and you have the filter on one of your bottles, you can pop a tablet in the other three. And so it means that you're not filtering heaps and heaps of water, you're just filtering as you drink. And if you're doing like a big water carry, that's when aqua tabs can be really good.
Yeah. We carry both. We generally carry both sunscreen and zinc, and the reason for that is we find that we kind of use them in different ways. So we really like using zinc for our faces because it stays on a lot longer and it's much more weight efficient. But we would use sunscreen for something like our legs because putting zinc on your legs is really kind of gross and you get
Wow.
dust stuck to it and it's not very nice. So for big areas, we will use sunscreen, but for smaller things like our face, we would definitely use the zinc just because it just stays on longer. It's just easier. So that's our preference. Again, there are things like toothpaste that we also have in our consumables, and hand sanitizer and insect repellent, all these little things that could be really useful, and you'll just be topping up as you hit your food drops. You don't need to carry enough for your whole trip, just enough to reach your next food drop.
Yeah, like I think a lot of like in this photo here, here is like some moisturizer. Oh, and we'll talk about some of these things in the next slide. But there's moisturizer, that's like an anti-chafe cream, and that's some sunscreen. And by having them in little tubs, you're not carrying all this extra weight that you don't need. Um, and so instead of not carrying it, it's generally better to just carry a little bit of it because, if you do need it, you probably will only need a small amount of it. And with insect repellent, we don't really like using DEET because it's corrosive on, like if you've got fancy ultralight fabrics and you get too much DEET on it, it'll like melt it. And it also just, it feels a bit burny on your skin, to us at least. And so we prefer using picaridin, which is sometimes like it's like the kids insect repellent, but we've found it a lot more effective than say like natural eucalyptus oil type things. So it's kind of the middle ground for us of like effectiveness and corrosiveness. Cool.
Yeah. Are there any questions regarding consumables? Oh, good question. So David's asked, do you know about whether insect repellents work against leeches? Um, I don't think they do, actually. Do you know, Tom?
Yeah, so the best answer is to pre-soak your clothes in permethrin. So permethrin is an insecticide that once it dries is safe. And so you can go to Paddy Palin and you can buy it in like these small quantities and you dilute it and you create like this tub of water that you put your clothes in, say like your shirt, your pants, your shorts, the top of your socks, and like your gaiters, maybe like the top of your hat, like not your undies. That's a bit weird. Um, but the point is that it acts like a permanent insect repellent on your clothes. And so on the Pacific Crest Trail, when we hit Oregon, um, oh, so we started with our clothes being soaked, but then 3,000 Ks in, obviously, it'd like completely worn off. And so we actually bought some of this stuff in town and soaked all our clothes in town. And then when we got back out, once they dried, we noticed like a very significant difference. Um, and it's part of this overall concept of like reducing bug pressure, where the pressure is like how many insects are around you or how like how repulsive you are to them. And, if you have, say, insect repellent on your legs or wherever you have exposed skin, and then you've got like an insect, you've got a treated head net, if there's heaps of mosquitoes and your clothes are soaked in permethrin, it's about having this multi-pronged approach where, like, if the tops of your socks are treated, that's going to stop them, or that's going to mean much fewer of them like crawl into your feet and like have a little suckle. Um, but honestly, the best thing with leeches is to be careful with where you stop and where you sit. Um, and when you're walking through overgrown scrub, um, you use your trekking poles to like push the bushes in front of you and to like knock them. Um, but it's typically around water sources um, like uh, black, what's it called? Black River's like a terrible one. Um, so like if you sat down next to a whole bunch of bushes after, at Black River, you'd be expected to get attacked by them.
Yeah, I walked
Cool.
out of
All right. Does anyone have any other questions on this stuff?
Yeah, sorry, that's it.
Cool. Is this me?
Oh no, I can go through this. So Footcare, this is kind of part of our first aid kit as well. Oh,
So yeah, so Claire's asking if there are like lots of mosquitoes around. I mean, in the evenings and the mornings there can be. This is where smart campsite selection comes into play. If you camp right next to water, there's going to be a lot more mosquitoes than if you camp somewhere further away from water, or if you're in like a valley versus on a ridge line, or in the wind or out of the wind. But yeah, we would carry a head net. The issue is much more likely to be marsh flies because they are big blood-sucking demons that will sap your soul. Because what they do is they bite you through the fabric, through like your shirt, and so that's where the permethrin soaking is really good. Um, and so yeah, I mean there are mosquitoes, but it's not like it's not any different to like anywhere else.
Yeah, so for Footcare, this is, yeah, like I was saying, kind of just part of our first aid kit, but we've just put it in a separate slide because ultimately a big chunk of our first aid kit is Footcare items. And so this is something we're going to talk about in more detail in one of the future sessions. But I'll just run through very quickly the items that we would carry to take care of our feet. And so these are things like lubricant to help prevent chafing. So that could be something like gurney goo. We've got moisturizer as well, which we apply to our feet every night just to keep our skin really soft, which is something we'll talk about in more detail in a future session, but that can really help prevent blisters. We carry some sort of friction reduction tape like Engo. We carry duct tape, kinesiology tape, some sort of breathable tape like Fixamol, some sort of rigid tape. All these different types of tape have various uses when it comes to dealing with blisters, but we find that they all can have a really good effect if you're having foot problems. And then a couple other things we'd carry are some toe gel caps and also a few joint dressings. And so joint dressings are not only really great uh, for blisters around your feet. They're called joint dressings because they've got like this H shape, and so they fit really nicely around fingers and toes. But they're also really great as just a general first aid item if you have a little cut or a scratch or anything. So Matt's just asked, what is rigid tape? Rigid tape is something like leukotape. It's
like the
something
brown stuff that AFL players cover their bodies in.
in this photo here. It's this brown thing down here. Yeah, it's often you might find it like rock climbers might use it for yeah, I don't really know, but it's just a tape that doesn't stretch. Um, so it's really good for reducing friction for your feet.
Yeah, what it does is it disperses shear forces over a broader area. So if this is like getting into the weeds of like the next topic, but it's just something that is really useful to carry for your feet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know this was really quick, but are there any questions about this? We'll definitely dive into this in one of the future sessions because it's a whole topic in and of itself. But are there any questions before we move on?
Yeah, and I guess the reason that we think foot care is something that deserves a whole topic is that, the number of people that have to cancel a hike because of foot problems, it's either you get an injury or you have blisters, and it's typically blisters. So, this is one of the most important things to get on top of, for having a successful hike without lots of unnecessary suffering. Cool. All right. And so now we're getting into some of, I guess, the more typical stuff that people think about with gear. And this is the clothing that you carry. So I guess maybe what we should actually do is we'll start with the clothes that we like to wear, and then we'll go back to the clothes that we like to carry. So the first thing is that we like to hike in shorts instead of pants. And so this is because we just find pants are too hot. We don't enjoy walking in pants. Like if it's really important to you that you walk in pants, then that's fine. But we just don't enjoy it. The main downside for us is the UV exposure to your legs. And so we would rather carry the weight in sunscreen and reapply and apply and reapply throughout the day than to wear pants because it's just too hot in summer. It's not very nice. So yeah, we wear shorts. Or if if you get chafing, maybe you're wearing like compression tights or something, like half-length compression tights. Uh, for our torso, we like to wear a long sleeve shirt, and this is one of those areas where there's a whole spectrum of shirts available. The ones that we like are around the 100-gram range, and they're made of like thin, breathable materials. And so, uh, yeah, we have some up on the website that you can check out. But if you have like a highly breathable long sleeve shirt that you can roll the sleeves up really easily and like unzip, is much, much more comfortable than a really tightly woven non-breathable shirt that isn't like, it's a completely different experience. So the reason we like long sleeve is to protect your arms from the sun and from mosquitoes. This is another area where like permethrin soaking your clothes is really good because a lot of the reason people go for the heavier shirts is because insects can't bite you through them. But the same reason that they can't bite you through them is the reason why they don't breathe very well. And so that's where soaking your clothes is a better option because then you maintain that breathability and that it dries a lot faster and holds much less moisture. Underwear, don't really need to talk about that. GPS watch, we talked about this a lot in our navigation session. You don't have to bring a GPS watch. The reason we like them on the Alpine track is because it adds a level of navigation redundancy. And if you're interested in that, you can go back to the other session. But you don't need to have it. But if you're hiking solo, if your phone breaks or something, it's really good to just be able to look at your watch. So shoes, this is something that we're going to talk about in a lot of detail in the blister session and the foot care because picking the right shoes is really, really important. And I think often when we think of shoes for hiking, we think of big, like big, heavy leather hiking boots. For us, what we've seen from our experience and from guiding is that lightweight, breathable trail runners is not only the most comfortable option, but in a sense, it's the safest option because you're much less likely to fall over with them because they're so much lighter and you get much fewer foot problems because of how breathable they are. Socks, we really like thin socks. Again, they hold less moisture and it gives you more space for your feet in your shoes. A lot of people's foot problems are because their shoes are too tight, and it's because they have really thick socks or two pairs of socks. So the two pairs of socks that we use the most are the Injinji liner socks, because they're toe socks, which we really like, and they're really thin. And then we also like Armor Skin socks. And so Armor Skin socks are really good because they're really good at preventing blisters if you feel a hot spot coming on. We've just put a review up on our site about them, so you can read that if you're interested. Gaiters. Oh, sorry, from David. He's asking if our socks are a merino blend. We prefer to have socks that aren't merino, because the problem with merino is that it absorbs lots of water. Merino socks are heavier than synthetic socks, and they hold much more water. So when you sweat or when it rains, it means that when your feet start to dry or air out, it means that your feet are wetter for much longer because of how much additional moisture they hold. But it is true that they don't smell as much, and maybe they're comfortable or something. But in the performance world of socks, we don't really find that they're that useful for us. Cool. Gaiters. So we don't use like big snake, like really tall snake gaiters. I mean, it's questionable if they even work, but I think the key takeaway of like the really tall gaiters is that they're too hot, and so they're not comfortable, they're not enjoyable. Like if you have a really thick long sleeve shirt, really thick heavy pants, and really tall snake gaiters, it's like you're just going to have a terrible time and you're going to overheat, and that creates its own safety problems. Like being comfortable, it's not only nicer, it's safer in some ways, because if you're overheating, you're sweating more, you're having to carry more water, your body's under extra stress, capacity your decision-making capacity is impaired. Claire's asking about why it's questionable if big tall gaiters work. Can snakes bite through tall gaiters? Like I guess it depends on which gaiter. I think the better option is to, like, if you're open to it, is to think realistically about what the risks associated with snakes are. And the reality is that hiking, the risks of getting bitten by a snake is extremely, extremely low. Fatalities are basically unheard of hiking. Like if you get bitten by a snake, it's almost certainly a dry bite. And so, like, realistically, I would say that wearing big, tall gaiters like increases your risk of something going wrong, because you're more likely to like trip and fall because they're heavy. There's heavy weight on your feet. We have to look at everything from a broad, cohesive perspective, rather than focusing on like a single narrow element. And so, there are situations where tall gaiters are really useful. But I don't think that alpine track is one of them. That's very different to walking in thick, like off-track scrub in Tassie, or say in WA, where there's like a tiger snake around every corner off track. So David's asking if these are Dirty Girl gaiters. Those ones specifically are not. They are the Trail Gators Australia.
Yeah.
But we would not recommend them. We recommend the Dirty Girl Gators, because the Velcro, the loop part of the hook and loop in the Velcro is much higher quality, and the hook in the Dirty Girl Gator version is much stronger. Like this hook breaks, the Dirty Girl hook doesn't break, and so these ones are a little bit heavier. They're
lighter.
The Dirty Girl ones are a little bit heavier, a little bit more expensive in Australia, but from our experience, our Dirty Girl gators still work after 5,000 Ks, whereas our Trail
Trail Gators
Gators Australia ones break after a couple months. So
these ones are quite a lot cheaper though, and a lot easier to get in Australia. So
yeah, I think Paddy Palin has Dirty Girl gaiters.
Okay.
With the gaiters, the main thing that puts people off is you have to attach Velcro to the back of your shoe. The trick is to use epoxy glue. Don't bother like using their adhesive. It's about using epoxy, and it's about sticking it to a surface that is not incredibly smooth. Like if you stick it onto smooth plastic, like it's probably not going to stick very well. But if it's stuck onto like a textured surface, then like it's never coming off. Yep. So that's gaiters. And the reason we like gaiters is because they keep dirt out of your shoes. And so it means that your socks last a lot longer, and it means that you get much fewer foot problems. I know I know a lot of people really focus on the snake issue, but I think the key point of the snake thing is to think about it from a more broad perspective and the real risk instead of the perceived risk. Cool. Sunglasses. I mean, you can spend a lot of money for sunglasses. You can spend not a lot of money on sunglasses. We really like Julbo sunglasses, and they are expensive. But for us, we spend hundreds of days outside hiking or ski touring or something every year. And so it's really important to us that we have nice sunglasses, particularly sunglasses that are photochromic are really good because that means that they change how dark they are based on how much light there is. So you can use them in lots of different conditions. Um, uh, but say for me, if I didn't take sunglasses, I get headaches in really bright light. And so that's why, like for like sunglasses, that's why, yeah, we definitely recommend taking sunglasses. For a hat, we touched on this earlier, but we really like taking a broad-brimmed hat, kind of like this guy here. And the exact model that we like, yeah, is in the gear list. But we don't really find caps work very well. It seems to be like a fashionable hiking thing in the US that people just use trucker caps, but they don't actually work. So if you want to get skin cancer, that's fine. But if you don't, then like broad-brimmed hats are the way to go. In particular, the things that we really like about this hat are it's like broad-brimmed at the front, but it's a flap at the back. And the reason a flap at the back is good is because it means your hood like fits really nicely over it. Whereas if it's broad-brimmed at the back, then the hood can be a bit awkward. The brim can also get stuck. It can hit your pack as well, and it can just cause problems. The other thing is that with some hats, they have like a split brim so that you can fold them up and pack them away. If they have a split brim, it basically means that it's not going to be very stiff at the front for very long. And so you really want a hat that is stiff at the front so that it doesn't like flop around a lot. This one in the front of the hat, it's made of foam, and so that's waterproof. And so we don't like hats are not just for sun protection, they're also for use in the rain. And so these hats are awesome because if you have a hood, either underneath the hat or over the hat, and then this kind of like this broad shape out here, it really means you don't get any rain in through your hood, which is one of the number one places where we typically find people get wet in the rain whilst hiking. And so yeah, it's really good to think of your hat as a rain accessory on top of a sun accessory.
Yep, no, that's it.
Yeah. The other thing is we leave little what are they called? Little clips, not paper clips.
Butterfly clips.
Yeah, butterfly clips attached to our hat because when you flip your hood up, if you clip it on, that keeps it really stable. Whereas in high winds or something, like your hood can fly off. So that's something that we really like to do. Trekking poles. So trekking poles, we think, well, if you're carrying a tent that needs trekking poles, then you should definitely be taking them. But yeah, we really like trekking poles. They really help with balance and stability, crossing rivers, going uphill, it can save your legs. Going downhill, it saves your knees. That doesn't mean you have to use them the whole time. Sometimes on the flat, it's really nice to just put your poles away and walk a little bit more freely, but we definitely recommend that you should bring hiking poles. There are lots of different models. There are lots of different types. We recommend one particular model. The main thing is that, the big debate is around carbon versus alloy poles. The pros of carbon poles are that they're lighter and they're stiffer, so that when you're putting force on them, they don't flex. The con of carbon poles is that when they break catastrophically, in that they snap. Whereas with an alloy pole, if you break it, it's probably just going to bend. The problem with alloy poles is that they will, like an alloy pole we have found will bend much more frequently than a carbon pole will snap. So we prefer carbon poles because, I mean, I don't think have I ever broken a carbon pole hiking? I don't know. It's very rare that it happens. And I guess if you have a tent that sets up with trekking poles, you can always like get the two pieces of the pole and like get like a stick and tape it back together. Where it's not really good enough to use as a pole, but you can still use it to set your tent up. The other thing is that Lecky do trekking poles that have a glove that hooks into the pole instead of the straps. And that's kind of like the hardcore option for people who are, if you're hiking really hard, or you're trying to cover as much distance as possible, those straps take the load off like the small muscles in your arms, and it means that you can use like the big muscles in your chest and your back. And so, yeah, if you're finding poles really, really useful, then you could look at the Lecky glove poles. And yeah, we definitely really like them. We've used them on all our speed records. I mean, you can, and we do use them normal hiking as well. But yeah, it's definitely something worth considering. Cool. So does anyone have any questions about the clothing that we like to wear? Cool. All right. And so I think this is the final one, isn't it?
Yep.
Yep. So the final one here is the clothes that we carry. And so, Catherine was asking about the shoes. Maybe next session. Yeah. So these specifically are the Speedgoat 5s. But with shoes, yeah, we like to use lightweight trail runners that aren't waterproof. And yeah, we'll talk about that more in the next session. Cool. So the clothes that we carry. So the first thing to preface about this is that everyone is different, and Maddie and I, we are cold people. We get cold really easily, and we really don't like being cold. So that is what our system is geared towards. Some people are like, "Oh, I'm never cold." When I did the Alpine track speed record with my friend Paul, like, we'd be walking sometimes at like 3 a.m. in the morning, and it would be pissing down with rain. And he would just have his rain jacket on and still have his shorts, no gloves, nothing, and he'd be completely fine. Whereas I'd have like my synthetic jacket, my rain pants on, I'd have gloves, and I'd be cold. So this is something where it's important to understand like your personal preference and whether you tend to run hot or cold. Having said that, the number one thing that we have found with hiking is that the times that stand out in our mind as the most unpleasant are when we're hiking in the rain and when there's lots of wind. And so because of that, our system is geared around keeping us warm in that scenario. We don't tend to, like, if you take a good sleeping bag, it's very rare that you get cold whilst you're sleeping. But getting cold whilst hiking in the rain is something that that can very easily happen on the Alpine track. The main range, it can snow any month of the year. It's very common to get, well, not common, but you can very easily get 100-kilometer-an-hour winds. And so if you get caught out in somewhere where it's starting to all go wrong, you can go hypothermic quite quickly. So the first thing that you might notice about this list of clothes that we carry is that there isn't any down in there. We don't carry a down jacket. For us, all of the clothes that we carry, we want to be able to wear whilst walking, because the time when we are most cold is when we're walking, when it's in the wind and rain. If we're at camp, we're not cold because we're in our tent in our toasty sleeping bag. So we don't really have like camp clothes and moving clothes. It's just all clothes are for moving, because the warmth for being stationary is your sleeping bag. Obviously, this is catering towards a specific style of hiking. Having said that, this setup is still comfy, this is still warm when you're static, down to like 0 degrees, not in the rain, if you're just hanging around camp. So the first thing is we like to take a type of fleece jacket. In particular, there are like new types of fleeces that have come out where the jackets are in the like 100 to 130 gram range. We're not talking about like really big, heavy fleeces. We're talking about thin fleeces that are basically bits of like fluff sewn together. And so we make some particular recommendations, but we really like a fleece jacket because it just adds a good level of warmth, and it's breathable, so you don't like trap heaps of sweat in it, and it works as a really good active layer, which means that the wind can come through it and cool you down really quickly. So, you could imagine if you're on a windy ridge line, you've got your fleece jacket on and you've got your rain jacket on, or a wind jacket. And then when you're overheating, you unzip it and like you dump your heat really quickly. But then if you're getting cold, you can zip it up and then you're getting like toasty again. So the next item is a synthetic jacket. So this is kind of instead of a down jacket. The reason is that synthetic jackets are much more resilient to moisture. So, if you end up in one of those bad scenarios where you're like walking and like it's pissing down with rain and you're getting cold, like if you put a down jacket on, its warmth is going to drop relatively quickly because the moisture will collapse the down. Whereas with a synthetic jacket, it's going to keep you warmer for longer. The idea that insulation is warm when wet is kind of like a bullshit marketing term. Like if it's fully soaked, like it's not going to be warm, but it will be more warm when it's a bit damp. So that's why we prefer synthetic jackets. And then yeah, we take a rain jacket on top of it. And it's important that all of these layers fit together. You're thinking about a fleece jacket and then a synthetic jacket and then a rain jacket that can fit on top of it. Like when buying a rain jacket, you kind of, let's say you normally buy medium clothes, maybe you consider a large rain jacket. Sometimes manufacturers make jackets that are like when they say they're medium, they're sized for medium people and are like more of a large. But the point is that you need to make sure that your layers all fit on top of each other. Then so that's kind of like our upper layer: fleece jacket, synthetic jacket, rain jacket. You could alter that by adding like a wind jacket in somewhere, but it's kind of up to you. The reason this is good is because we're focused on breathability, because a lot of the time when you're moving, if you generate lots of sweat and it gets trapped in your system, you're getting wet from the inside, not the outside. So you need to be able to dump that heat, and you need a system that's breathable. And so we recommend some products that we like. And then for the legs, it's pretty similar, but without the synthetic jacket, without the synthetic pants, which you can get if you get really cold and they're really nice. But for the alpine track, you typically don't need it. We really like fleece pants because they're really comfortable to sleep in. They're really nice to just walk in the morning when it's cold. And then the rain pants are really good for if you're at a stop and you don't want your legs to get bitten by mosquitoes, or obviously if it's raining or really windy. Again, if you don't get cold that easily, you could swap the fleece pants for wind pants to save some weight. But yeah, we'd really challenge you to think about moving away from like hiking pant, rain pant like that concept, because you can probably get a lot more versatility and a level of comfort in different environments at a much lighter weight if you consider, other options. And so here we're talking about fleece pants that are like 100 grams, rain pants that are like 100 grams. You can get really like bulky, heavy versions of all these things, but you can also get lighter versions of them. With rain pants, they're the type of thing where we've never had any rain pants that actually really work 100% in extended like downpours. It's the type of thing where it's about, keeping you drier and keeping you warmer, rather than keeping you dry and warm. And that's when, that's why we have these other insulation layers to help us stay warm.
The other really important thing to consider with your rain pants is that you want to make sure that they're wide enough that they can fit over your shoe. So you want to be able to put them on pretty quickly when it's raining, and to do that you don't want to have to take your shoes off. So it's always worth checking that the bottom bit of your rain pant can actually fit over your shoe, which isn't always the case. And it's really annoying if it's raining and you have to take your shoes off to put your rain pants on. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, the other thing I forgot about rain pants is that I don't know if you guys have seen it, but rain skirts are also a product that exists. For us, if we are getting hot in rain pants, but it's raining, we just roll them up and turn them into shorts. So, and we find that's like heaps of ventilation. And so because we tend to run cold instead of warm, we're not like, that's not something that we worry about heaps. But it's, if you do have rain pants, it's really nice to know to have a little system to roll them up and turn them into shorts. I guess with the rain jacket, the other thing that we could mention is it's really good to have a rain jacket that has pit zips, because that just lets you ventilate out the sides a lot more, which works really well in the rain, and it can stop you from sweating as much. Then finally, we like to bring a buff. It's just convenient. We like to use it for sleeping to block the sun, keep your ears warm. I guess both of our jackets have hoods on them, so we don't need like more like a dedicated head insulation piece. The buff is nice for like when there's really high winds, for like keeping, I like to wear a buff when there's really high winds. I just find it more comfortable. And then gloves, again, like you don't need to go over the top with gloves, but just some like thin fleece gloves are really nice. We really like flip top mittens, because mittens are way warmer than gloves, but by being able to like flip the mitten up, you can you get the dexterity, so it's like a good middle ground. And then waterproof gloves. The big thing about waterproof gloves is that if you're looking at the really light ones, the problem with a lot of them is that they require you to do your own seam sealing. And so what that means is you have to get this like little liquid and put it around the seam of like the glove where it's been sewn. And the problem with that is we've never done it successfully, and we've tried really hard. And so we don't really believe that you can like seam seal these things yourself properly. So it's important to buy waterproof gloves that are seam taped. And so, that's when there's been someone or like a machine has like taped the seam instead of you sealing it with this liquid that dries. Some people might go, oh, why would you take waterproof gloves? They're not like, they're heavy, you don't need them. For us, you wake up in the morning and it's a cold morning, and your tent is like covered in condensation, and you got to pack your tent up. It's really nice to just pack the tent up with your gloves and then your waterproof gloves so your hands don't get really cold, or if it's just one of those things where for an extra like 30 grams, for us, it adds a lot of comfort to being on the trail, and that's worth it to us. Whereas someone else might go, my hands are never cold, I'm not going to take them. The really light and cheap option is like muffin bags or something, which we've used before, and they work really well. Cool. Spare underwear. We bring 1 pair of spare undies. We find that's enough. You can wash them. Spare socks. In general, we like to have a total of 3 pairs of socks, including the ones that we're walking in. So you have like a clean pair that you sleep in, and then you have like 2 pairs that you're walking in that you rotate and wash them. And then when one of the pairs that you're walking in, it's starting to like nearly get a hole or something, you can clean it really well and it can become your sleep socks. And then your 3rd sock comes into that rotation. And then in your drops, you can have, extra socks, which will feel very luxurious. The final thing that we have on here, oh yeah, so David, David's asking about if we carry any spare shorts or shirts, or if we change out at the drops or something like that. So we don't carry any spare shirts or spare shorts. We don't think you need them. Like the absolute worst case scenario is that you're hiking in all of your layers because it's really cold, and you set up your tent and like everything's saturated, and you take it all off and you hop in your sleeping bag and you sleep in your sleeping bag, and then the next morning you get out of your sleeping bag when it's a little bit warmer and you're brave enough to face the day. You put your cold clothes on and then you start walking again. So that is very much like on the more Spartan end of things. But it works. If you're really keen to have dedicated sleep clothes, companies like Montbell make clothes that are really light. Like you can get a t-shirt that's like 50 grams, and you can get like 3/4 length tights that are 60 or 70 grams, And so if it's really important to you to have like spare sleeping stuff, or just the concept of having dry clothes to hop into, like that totally makes sense. It's totally reasonable. And what we would encourage you to do is to try, like, think about how you can achieve that, but without carrying like a 200-gram shirt, a 200-gram set of pants, because you're just going to find that you're carrying a lot of weight for something that you use very, very infrequently.
The other thing to mention though is that you absolutely can put spare clothes in your food drops, and we have done that before, and it's really nice.
Yeah.
You don't need to, but it's just really nice to swap into a clean pair of clothes. So that's definitely something that's worth doing if you think it'll give you a big mental boost, which it does do. It's very nice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you'll feel like a king or a queen. So the final item that we have here is a poncho. And some people might say, oh, you guys are crazy. You've got rain pants, you've got a rain jacket, you've got rain mitts, you've got an umbrella, and you've got a poncho. Like, are you wusses? And maybe we are, but we just find that this system works. If you have like a poncho, the reason a poncho is awesome is because it keeps everything dry. Like you stay dry with a poncho. You don't stay dry with a rain jacket or rain pants, but you stay dry with a poncho. If you have a pack that is like small, you get the added benefit that it's really easy for the poncho to keep your pack dry. And so in New Zealand, on the Aotearoa FKT, and in New Zealand, it rains all the time. It would just start raining for 15 minutes, it would stop, it would start again. The good thing about a poncho is that whilst you're walking, you can just take it out and pop it on. You don't even have to stop walking, right? Because there are times when, you might see the rain clouds coming in and you're like, oh, do I put my rain jacket on or not? But with a poncho, it's really easy to take it on and off. And you just need to make sure that you have like a waist strap to stop it blowing about in the wind. And it's definitely one of those things where it's nicer when you have a smaller pack. So Glenn has asked if that poncho is a technical bit of gear or a cheap throwaway. In this image here, that is like one of those normal plastic, like disposable ponchos. I would expect that you could do the entire alpine track with one of them. Maybe you'd have one in a spare drop occasionally. you can also, like, the benefit of these is that they're like 50 grams. You can get more durable ones from like Cedar Summit made out of sil nylon that are more like 140 grams. But we think that the usable lifespan of one of these ponchos, especially if you patch it, is enough to justify, it being a non-permanent item. Like if you do the whole alpine track with one of these, then, obviously it's a personal judgment that you need to make, but for us that seems reasonable. So the other thing about a poncho, so Glenn is asking, so how do you pair it with a raincoat? So basically, if it's hot, or wet, like it's 30 degrees or it's like a summer thunderstorm, we'll just wear the poncho and have like maybe our umbrella out or just the poncho hood up. But if it's really cold, what we really like to do is have the rain pants on, have the rain jacket on, and then have the poncho over the top. The reason that that's really good is because it opens you up to having more ventilation through your rain gear. Like you can have your pit zips fully undone, or, if you have long enough pit zips, you can have your arms hanging out of the pit zips, not even in the rain jacket, and you can have the front of your jacket unzipped more. And so it's giving you more ventilation. And then you can just zip it up if you're getting cold or unzip it if you need, if you're going uphill or something. And then with the rain pants, if it's cold, you have them unrolled fully down. Whereas if you're getting hot, you roll them up and turn them into shorts. The point is that with a poncho, it actually keeps you dry. And if it's really cold, you can just pull your arms like in from the poncho and like sit in like a little turtle and just like hold the straps. And the rain is just falling off you, but you've still got good ventilation.
Yeah, I think, the really important distinction is that the rain jacket and the rain pants, they keep you warm in the rain, whereas the poncho keeps you dry. So it's kind of using both at the same time. But, if it's really windy, then we would just use our rain jacket because the poncho flaps around and is really annoying. But if it's not windy, we would probably have both on.
Yeah. And that's where, if you have a smaller pack, you can have a smaller poncho and it doesn't blow about in the wind as much. Like in all honesty, the poncho and the umbrella are real game changers for us, where for like 200 grams between the two of them, the amount of comfort that it adds in the hottest part of the day or in the rain, those are the two things that are probably like the least comfortable for us. It just adds massive amounts of comfort in them, And then with the poncho, like your pack stays dry, everything. Like when you get into camp, you're like, oh, I've got a dry pack, It's just great. You're like, I guess the other reason, when we're talking about not having any spare clothes, it's like if you have a poncho, you can be a lot more confident that your shirt is going to be dry like basically the whole time because it just doesn't really get wet.
Thanks, Claire. We'll see you next time.
Cool. All right. Does anyone have any questions about this stuff? Cool. All right. I think
that's actually the end.
I think that's it. Great. Perfect timing. And we were unsuccessful in making it shorter than the last one.
Does anyone have any questions related to what we've talked about or just anything in general?
Yeah, it's Glenn here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just going back to rain gear. So I guess my dilemma, I've collected so much gear over the years and got lighter and lighter every year. So I have so many, Gore-Tex jackets and numerous rain pants, but, sort of around the pants you get the 2.5 pack light, sort of 250 grams, and the jacket's probably 480. And I think it's those areas I'm trying to get lighter. Is that just a question of spending more money, I guess, or are there cheaper options? I like the poncho. I've actually used them or taken but never used them, so I'm really interested in trying that in the umbrella. But I'm just not sure whether I take my the Gore-Tex gear I've got, or do I really need to simply bite the bullet and go lighter?
Yeah, I think the so the good thing about going down the approach of a poncho and an umbrella is that you're relying less on your rain gear. And so in a sense you can get away with like cheaper, shittier rain gear. And and so what basically, because of the boom in trail running and ultra races and all that stuff, right? There's been a complete race to the bottom of who can make the lightest rain jacket that like is approved for a certain trail race. Um, the problem with them is that they're often not like made of super breathable fabrics or something like that. But
Yeah.
if you're using it as an adjunct in combination with a poncho, that doesn't matter to you because you just unzip it. Um, and so, yeah, you can find like trail running waterproof gear that is maybe not like the most waterproof thing in the world, but if you're using it combined with a poncho, then it works really well. And that's what we did in that's what we did in New Zealand on the TA FKT, where, we were still using like not the cheap stuff, we were using really good stuff, but we could use a rain jacket that was 100 grams and rain pants that were 80 grams, and we stayed dry because we were using the poncho as well. The area where you can get unstuck on the alpine track is that you don't want to use something that will like tear really easily. So something like the Frog Tog rain jacket, which is like a really
One of those.
popular option on the PCT, you know, we wouldn't like Frog Togs are going to get torn up on the alpine track. And so that would not be an example of like a good cheap jacket.
Yeah.
And so if you want, you can send us a message and we can chat gear. But it's actually, yeah, an article that we've got coming up is like a kind of the budget version of like all this stuff that we're talking about. But yeah, like it is really like you should look at like the trail running space because they have some good stuff.
Okay, no, I'll do that. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, no, it does. I guess for me, the heavier stuff, I'm happy to take if I'm doing a 3 or 4 day somewhere. But if you're doing 2 weeks and there's more food and whatnot, I'm just trying to start shaving a bit more off. And the rain gear to me is at this point the obvious option because it's the heaviest component, and you may not even bring it out. So it really annoys me that I'm have to carry heavy stuff that may not get used.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, cool. Well, great.
I'll try the poncho option. I like the umbrella idea. I've thought about it, but just I'm a 2-pole hiker, so it's sort of
Yeah, you're committed.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, look, thanks guys. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions? Awesome. Great.
Cool. Well, that's the end of the session then. We'll be posting out the next one soon.
It'll probably be in about 2 weeks.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.